Alright, so we're going to load the puzzle case top in. We're going to use the free move and free rotate tool just to position it close to where it's going to go. Alright, now a couple things that are like a little bit different from what we did before. Alright, we're going to use our constraint tool. We're still going to use the mate constraint just to get going. Alright, and what I'm going to do is instead of mating two surfaces, and this might have been something people like inadvertently did, and I asked you not to do it and to hit undo and kind of go back. What we're going to do is this time we're going to connect, or we're going to mate up two edges. Alright, so for this one, check this out. This is a little bit different. You don't want to pick the surface. You want to make sure you pick the edge. So I'm going to just kind of hover my cursor there for a minute. You should see the line pre-selecting green. And if you leave your cursor there for just a second, it actually reads the word edge. Okay, so I can then click on an edge. And now I just have to tell the computer what other edge I want to line up with it. And it's going to put those two edges exactly on top of each other. Alright, so you should hear that click. I'm going to press apply. And if we take a look at it really quick, the case does kind of work the way that it should in real life. The only difference, the only problem is the surface of the case moves around a little bit. So for right now, I'm going to click on the constraint tool again. I'm going to add my second constraint to this, and this time I'm going to go flush. I'm going to pick the edge of one case and the edge of the other, and that's just going to make those two surfaces completely flush with each other. So at that point, if you hit apply, you have two constraints on there. The edges are mated together, so the computer knows they have to lock in place. All right, and then I also have the two flush surfaces locked in place, so the case kind of goes together that way. A couple things though, if you open the case too far, you're going to notice that the two components can kind of intersect and go together and overlap, so you have like these intersecting objects, and that's not very realistic. You could also go the other way and be able to not really find the location where your case is going to perfectly close. Alright, so you have like the potential for your case to go a little too far shut. So there's a way that we can fix that. Alright, and I want to just kind of take you through that really quick. So just watch up here. I'm recording this on YouTube. You can go back through it at your own pace here in a minute. But what we have is we have another constraint tool. And this was the second type of constraint that I didn't show you necessarily yesterday, but I did make you aware of. Okay, so this is called an angular constraint. And it's really simple. You just pick two surfaces that are going to have an angle between them. Alright, so right here, the top of the case that's grounded, and the bottom of the case that's going to close on it. Alright, and all we have to do is put in, or enter the angle that we want those to close at. Alright? And what we should end up with, actually we got to pick the solution first, so there's three different solutions. I'm going to go to the first one. But then we just put in the angle that we want them to correspond to. So at 0 degrees, there's going to be a 0 degree angle between those. If I put in a negative 90 on there, I can lock the case in perfectly perpendicular to the surface. If I put in another negative 90, nothing happens, I guess, because we already entered it. Okay, so here's what I want to show you real quick. With that angle put in and the constraint locked in, this top piece can't really move because that angular constraint is on there. If you select any of the objects in the assembly, all right, and you look at your model browser, you should be able to see which one of the objects is selected because it's highlighted. Okay, so if I pick like this small L block, I know that I have my small L block selected. If I pick the L block, the big one in the corner, I know that I have my L block number 1 selected. If I pick the case, the top of the case, you can see that Mosaic Puzzle Case 2 is selected. Alright, if you hit the little plus symbol underneath that, you can kind of see the history of all the constraints that were put on. So I have mate constraint 39 was the edge. We picked the edges first. Then you had flush constraint number 5. That was the two edges of the case that we locked in place and put together. Down here at the bottom you have angle 1. This is your first angular constraint you put on. It's at negative 90. You can now change that value if you want. So you can go negative 180. All right, and you can lock your puzzle case completely shut. You can pick it again. You could go back and you could do negative 135. Lock it up at a 45-degree angle. So you can show your puzzle case in a number of different situations. All right, so that's pretty cool. Some of you might want to actually set this up so that you can see this thing in action. All right, so check this out. This is kind of cool. So if you go to that angle constraint, once it's set up, you have an option in here, something called drive constraint, or drive. Okay, so for an angular constraint, where there's an angle in there, all right, that you might want to show in a couple of different maybe positions, all right, you can click drive. And drive is really cool. You can set a value in start and you can set a value in end, and the computer is going to create a little animation that plays back and forth between those two positions. Okay, so at the start, if we go to negative 180, and at the close we go to 0, and we press the play button, I can actually show like a little animation of the case opening all the way or closing, which is kind of cool. All right, so that's your drive constraint. So you guys can play around with that for a little bit. See if you can get that puzzle case top on there. See if you can set it up at an angle that it looks like it's open from. And then if you want to mess around a little bit with animating that, that would be pretty cool. Okay? So give that a shot.